Welcome to SOCH 444A, Survey Research. Once you've completed the lecture, you will be asked to take a short comprehension quiz. This quiz will help you find gaps in your understanding and help you identify areas in need of further review. I look forward to seeing you in class. The classroom is ultimately an artificial environment. Here, we ask you to develop ideas based on what we, and this is a very big we, the educational institution, the field, professional associations, the government, and so forth, think it's important for you to master as part of this discipline. Hence, while normally you would begin with a research question or problem and then assess the most efficacious or best way to answer that question, in this case, you will be artificially attempting to select a research question or problem that is best addressed by a survey. Fundamentally, research is the result of a question, problem, or idea that comes from both your mastery of the field and your personal passions. Some potential sources for research ideas are your personal experiences, the mass media, a critical debate in your field, something new that's affecting social life. For example, I had initially planned to write my doctoral dissertation as an application of Bourdieu's concepts to gender relations in men's and women's college basketball. This is what I'd done my master's thesis on. As a longtime participant in adult co-ed recreational softball, I decided to write a paper on this topic for a class. As I began researching the project, I discovered that there was almost no literature on adult recreation for non-elite athletes. There was almost nothing on co-ed sports either. This allowed me an opportunity to combine my personal interest with a professional interest and became an engaging project for me. Because there was very little published in this field, I actually became one of the world's leading experts very quickly. Take a moment to consider what topics you would be interested in studying and if there was something that a survey would be useful for. I'm often asked, why did you become a sociologist? The short answer to that is, as a child, I was too often told that I couldn't do things I seemed to be pretty good at, and that I shouldn't enjoy things I seemed to enjoy, and that other people should and could do these things. This didn't seem to make sense to me. If I liked sports, cars, and the color green, why was this a problem? My best friends were all encouraged in these things. My parents didn't seem to have a problem with me playing sports in my favorite green t-shirt, so why were teachers, babysitters, and other kids telling me that this was wrong? I came to sociology through gender discrimination. As I got older, I read amazing pieces of literature that problematized poverty, racism, sexism, and heterosexism, and I began to wonder about not only these experiences, but the structures that connected them, and that the experiences for people were different because of seemingly minor biological differences. When I arrived as an undeclared freshman at UC Berkeley, I shopped for my major, taking a host of social science classes. Ann Swidler's Intro to Sociology course ignited my burgeoning sociological imagination. I remember feeling like most of the time I looked at the same things as other people, but I was standing a lot further back. Sociology seemed like a whole group of people standing with me, struggling to figure out how to make the world more equitable. I felt like I was finally truly home. What about you? What made sociology or psychology your major and hopefully one of your passions? Of course, when you do begin your project, you have to keep the audience's expectations and/or requirements in mind. In this case, you need to pass this class. Take a careful look at the material I post online and ask me in class about these requirements. What do other people need to know to understand why you're researching what you're researching? This is where the literature review will come in. So again, keep in mind not only your passions, but who your audience is. What are the expectations and requirements? What sort of presentation of results will your audience expect? What will make sense to them? What will they be able to understand? What would an enlightened discussion look like? Preparing to present to academics in the field versus students versus a lay audience are all very different types of presentations. It's critical that you begin with providing enough background information for the reader so he or she can understand what leads up to your research question. This serves a dual purpose. It demonstrates your mastery or competence in your field, and it gives the reader sufficient background knowledge to make sense of your study and eventual analysis. This is accomplished with the literature review. This will be covered in a separate upcoming module. For now, take a moment to ask yourself, what unanswered questions do you have about the social world? Is there anything that you think would make a good class project? So once you have a research topic, how do you narrow it down into something that can be researched, studied, or investigated? First and foremost, start by examining the literature in your field and related fields. What do we already know about this topic? What questions have others raised? Are there any key debates regarding this topic? Is it something that might change over time as other aspects of our culture change? Are key terms defined in the field in very specific or explicit ways? In past studies, how have the concepts associated with your ideas been measured? Have those ways been effective? Second, talk to your colleagues. Can professors or students point you in the direction of useful research? Do others have creative ideas for measuring concepts? Keep in mind, with a survey, you always have to think about how are you going to measure the components of your hypotheses with a survey question. Third, if you have a general idea for a topic, try applying it to a specific context. If you're interested in the impact of cultural centers on student retention, try studying the impact on one campus first. Lastly, consider your aim or goal. What is the purpose of your study? There may be several different reasons you're doing the study. You may want to make people aware of a social problem or issue, collect concrete evidence, pass your methods requirement. You might have a lot of reasons for picking a particular topic of study. Keep in mind, when examining the literature, don't just stick to what's obvious. Reach out into a broader range of databases. There's a lot of literature out there. It's going to take a while to sort through it all. Cal Poly Pomona is learn by doing. For the purpose of gaining first-hand experience with survey research, this class will work together to first, select a research topic, second, develop testable hypotheses, third, design and administer this original survey, fourth, analyze the data, and finally, present the results in the form of a solo authored term paper and a YouTube video created with Captivate. Remember, whatever topic you pick, this is a survey research class. You're going to have to use quantitative research methods to test your hypotheses. Now, the good news is the computer's going to do the mathematics for you, but you're going to have to construct meaningful research hypotheses. You can view the module on hypotheses for more information. Surveys work best when you're measuring basic demographic information, things like gender, ethnicity, age, people's attitudes, beliefs, or self-reports of behavior. But not everything can be studied with a survey. Remember, when we ask people something, they're giving us their belief or their attitude, probably not actual fact. Also keep in mind that our data set is going to be constructed as a convenient sample out of people we know. So if you have a very specialized hypothesis, there might not be enough people in the data set that meet the criterion to really test it. Whenever one is conducting research, you must consider external limitations. The ideal way to conduct research and the concessions you need to make to circumstance always force a compromise. Time is always one of the biggest limitations. Deadlines pose a significant restriction on research in both a beneficial and a problematic way. Indeed, some research might never be concluded without some sort of deadline to curb the obsessive restructuring of the perfectionist researcher. On the other hand, time limits may force a researcher to use less than ideal strategies. In our case, we have a severe time limitation that most of the detailed pre-testing and development of sampling strategies usual to research must be severely abbreviated. Money. Research can be quite expensive. The budget always imposes a limitation. Just as you may not be able to indulge in all of your desires when it comes to fun, one generally cannot have the ideal research project because the financial cost is too high. For example, the Empire survey that we used to subcontract to CSU San Bernardino, a random digit dialing survey of approximately 1,000 residents of the Inland Empire, cost us between $50,000 and $60,000 most years. We did offer the survey in 2 languages, English and Spanish, but we would have liked to include a wider range of languages. Cost was prohibitive. Ethical considerations. Are there serious ethical concerns with the process by which you're collecting your data? Are your subjects vulnerable? Is there some concern about how your data will be used? It's imperative that you fully consider all ethical problems that may arise during the research process. IRB approval or professional approval. All universities have institutional research boards that approve research. This is done for the protection of your subjects or participants, both human or animal. You must obtain IRB board approval prior to beginning a research project you intend to publicly present. Classroom activities don't need IRB approval. Access to resources. Will you have access to the subject population you need and to the resources you need to complete your project? I might want to go deep cover into fraternities to explore sexual assault, but I'm too old and the wrong gender. I can't do it. There also would be serious ethical concerns with that project. Finally, you want to carefully consider the politics of research. How does your research fit into the larger scope of research in your field? The first paper I published was a gay rights piece called "There's No Such Thing as a Gay Hero." While I stand by that research and I'm very proud of what it says, politically it was a dangerous move for someone on the job market. It probably locked me out of several jobs for which I might have been considered otherwise. So why is a good research design important? Everyday thinking is replete with inaccuracies, bias, and misconceptions. Without a solid research design, we wouldn't be getting accurate answers to our questions. A good research design allows us to overcome our own blind spots, providing us with accurate data. So what sort of mistakes do people tend to make? People ask biased questions. As we view the world, most of us tend to start with questions that already contain some bias about how we think about the way the world ought to work. A good research design works to distill our questions down to something that is less biased in how we frame the questions we ask. Often our initial ideas contain within them erroneous beliefs. Hence, exploring existing research is paramount to improving our research questions. Selective perception or observation. People tend to see things that confirm already held beliefs, even when confronted with evidence to the contrary. For example, I was listening to an NPR, and a researcher was discussing new evidence that risky sexual behavior among teens is down, and there's a decrease in teenage pregnancies among all ethnic groups. A caller insisted that the research could not be correct because she was sure she'd seen many pregnant, insert inappropriate ethnic slur here, teenagers hanging out on street corners. Obviously, this person had preconceived notions about young people, people of other races, and an overinflated sense of judgment. She really had no way of knowing the age, race, and even pregnancy status of many she was seeing and judging to be unwed mothers. That's the problem with selective perception. People see what they believe they're going to see. In addition, people tend to generalize and make assumptions. We also tend to associate primarily with people who have similar worldviews that we have, or have limited or biased samples. And I can give you an example here. Maybe 10 years ago, I was asked if I thought that gay marriage would play a large role in electoral politics. I thought about it and said, no, I don't think so. I mean, everybody I know thinks it's a civil rights issue, even if they're not something that they personally support or not something their religion supports. They all sort of support the idea that that consenting adults have this right. Well, obviously, I was wrong. I have a very limited or biased sample of people I associate with. Obviously, a very large group of people who hold to a particular democratic ideal viewpoint that a good portion of the country does not share. A solid research design will provide more accurate data on the issue, problem, or situation at hand. Once you have an idea or a topic for your project, the first step is always a comprehensive literature review. It is imperative that you start by finding out what your field already knows, thinks, or believes about a topic. You will need to both demonstrate your familiarity with your field and inform the reader of any requisite background information he or she needs to understand your project. Moreover, you need to provide a theoretical orientation to your work. With whom in the field are you allied? If there is a key debate over an issue, on which side do you fall? If there are standard definitions in your field, make sure you clarify these for your project. The literature in your field should provide a source of inspiration for new ideas and clear guidelines for how existing research has been done. Creative new ideas for research designs may also emerge. In the real world, your research design should follow from your research question, of course, given limitations. In the artificial classroom environment, your research design must be for a convenient survey distributed via social media. As a class, we're going to select a general topic for the survey, design the survey, and then distribute it. The general meaning of the word survey is to examine or look comprehensively. A social science survey takes the same idea but codifies it as a methodology designed to provide an overview of a population or group. Surveys ask questions to measure demographics, attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. A survey can measure these things for individuals, but you can also survey groups, units, organizations, and so forth. For example, one might survey all of the clubs on campus about membership, what the club provides, etc. The earliest record of a survey is generally what is called a census, or an attempt to measure the whole population. References to census surveys can be found in the Bible and in the histories of many nations. Over the last 300 years, with the growth of the bureaucratization of the modern state, surveys have increased in use. Really, the technological expansion of the last 50 years has significantly increased the viability of survey research. Without modern computer applications, the mathematics necessary for hypothesis testing would be incredibly time-consuming. Now, the computer can give us an answer in a matter of seconds and facilitates all sorts of creative data manipulation. Sometimes this can provide more accurate results. Sometimes it can impede research or obscure results. In U.S. social theory, for many years, surveys meant positivistic research. Doing surveys meant a specific theoretical worldview. However, today, surveys are used in a wide range of projects with a diversity of theoretical orientations. What do surveys do well? When done properly, surveys are great for projects that require one to analyze or describe a group of people. Surveys can allow one to generalize or apply to a wider population's observations and analyses. In some cases, the observations may provide valuable information for understanding other populations. Perhaps a well-done survey at Cal Poly Pomona would also be useful in understanding challenges faced by students at Cal State LA. Survey data allows us to test theories, provide insight to policymakers, measure the success of new programs, and understand populations at one point in time and across time. When something new happens, surveys help us get a handle on what we should be studying. So do surveys guarantee generalizable, unbiased results and inform policies and policymakers? No, of course not. Statistics can be manipulated, as Darrell Huff so famously points out in How to Lie with Statistics. Good social science strives to present the most accurate picture possible, but even if you do a great job of this, you may still find that no one's listening. In addition, there is always bias inherent. though you should always do your best to confront, acknowledge, address, and minimize bias. But bias will always be present in the questions we ask, how we group or categorize people. The categories that have historical significance reflect relations of privilege and oppression. For example, there's no clear biological basis to race, but it reflects colonial relations of privilege and oppression. Labels matter. Some labels are more appealing than others. And lastly, interpretation of data always involves your preconceived notions and those of your field. Historically, survey research was aligned with structural functionalism and positivism. In this view, a single truth with a capital T could be uncovered through scientific study. Today, theories that better deal with the effects of privilege and oppression employ survey research in a variety of types of research. So please don't think surveys preclude activist, radical, or theoretical research. Fortunately, surveys were not abandoned as a methodology. However, keep in mind, surveys are not always appropriate. In-depth why questions are sometimes better addressed with interviews. The primary strength of survey research is generalizable data and hypothesis testing, but this isn't the best way to address every question. What are the advantages and weaknesses of survey research? Surveys are very versatile. Most topics could have some data collected on a survey. Surveys are also efficient. You can gather data from a large number of individuals in a relatively short time period when compared to focus groups, in-depth interviews, and participant observation. And finally, the ability to generalize to the larger population with the help of inferential statistics is an enormous advantage. Generalizability is probably the strongest point of surveys. On the other hand, surveys are limited by the fact they're often self-reports. They measure what people say they do, not what they actually do. Moreover, surveys can lack nuance and subtleties of human interaction. For example, perception of immigration as a problem can mean an anti-immigrant stance or a concern that insufficient resources are being provided for immigrants. Survey data is still interpreted by human beings. As survey researchers like to say, when you encounter a problem with your computer analysis, it's usually the nut with the mouse. Generally, there are two types or styles of survey research: large-scale, research-intensive surveys that use representative samples and are designed for the purpose of generalizing about larger populations. There are also smaller-scale, more focused surveys that focus on specific groups. These surveys are not focused on generalizing, but on studying something very explicit about a particular group of people. So in conclusion, surveys can be a valuable tool in your methodological toolkit. By developing an array of skills, mixed methods research becomes possible. Surveys combine well with qualitative methodologies that can add explanation and in-depth information to your quantitative methodologies. Finally, here are a few quotes from Darrell Huff.